And it is 7:01, President Ziegler.
I'd like to call the meeting to order. This is the continuation of our regular April meeting, the second continuation, 12th meeting.
The April 12th.
Pursuant to COVID conditions, we're still meeting remotely because I've determined it's not prudent to meet in person at this time, but we're working on improving that. If I recall, we were in a closed session when we made the decision to.
That is,
Mr. President, I'm sorry, Mr. Jeffrey.
Mr. Jeffrey,
Go ahead.
Administrator Jeffrey, can you?
President Ziegler matters. Yeah, that was my recollection that we had left the closed meeting adjourned with the remaining items of the reports and upcoming events afterwards to address.
Are we going to go back into closed session? I thought that's what we were going to do.
I believe that that's correct. Administrator Jeffrey, is that your?
That is correct. Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
So is there a motion?
Mr. President,
Yes.
I move that we go into closed session regarding the parcels, and if Administrator Jeffrey wouldn't mind listing those for the record.
The parcels are 9955 Spring Road, 9875 Spring Road, and a third unaddressed parcel with PID number 281162232005.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Do we have any further discussion?
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Hi, it's Michael Welch here as legal counsel. My understanding is that the closed session is to discuss the development of a purchase or sale of the identified property.
That is correct.
Thank you for that clarification.
Okay. Is there any other? I mean, I guess we didn't take a roll call vote. No. On the, I'm sorry, we didn't take attendance. But maybe we can do that quickly and then go to the roll call vote. Administrator Jeffrey, can you run us through the attendance?
Certainly could. This is a roll call vote for who is present. Manager Crafton.
Here.
Manager DeVal.
Present.
Manager Cook.
Present.
Manager Pedersen.
Present.
President Ziegler.
Present.
All right, everyone's here.
So in addition, we have a couple other people, I think. No?
Yep. Also with us, Michael Welch, District Attorney, acting on behalf of the District Attorney, Scott Sobiek, Bar Engineering, District Engineer, and Mr. Pressman is with us tonight, and he will be joining us in the closed session to discuss those properties mentioned.
Okay. So Administrator Jeffrey, can you take us through a roll call vote on going to closed session?
Yes, I can. To go into this closed session, Manager Crafton.
Yes.
Manager DeVal.
Yes.
Manager Cook.
Yes.
Manager Pedersen.
Yes.
And President Ziegler.
Yes.
5-0 to go into closed session. I'm not still sharing my screen, and I know. Okay.
Okay, I believe that Manager Cook had put together at least the framework of a motion for approving some value or amount of time to get a rough estimate or I'm going to say rough estimate of what the value of the property that we want versus the whole property, with the understanding that we only really want the part that's risky with regards to slope and the creek.
Well, Mr. President,
Yeah, you can probably word it better than I did.
yeah, well, I wouldn't
And-
say that. I would never say that on that basis. But first of all, I think we're supposed to note for the record that we've come out of closed session regarding those parcels. And Mr. Jeffrey, if you'd be kind enough to repeat those.
I will. A moment, please. They are parcels 9955 Spring Road, 9875 Spring Road, and an unaddressed property with PID number 281162232005.
So if I could continue, Mr. President.
Manager Cook,
So I will move that the district engage, I believe it's Conservation Solutions, and in particular, Mr. Pressman, to perform services as outlined in his letter to us that was previously provided to us, to work with staff regarding various delineations of those parcels in question that may provide protection of the creek and the bluff, and that Mr. Pressman provide us with the names and contacts for appraisers for us to consider and engage to provide us with appraisals for the property and parts thereof, including portions that would be deemed appropriate for the protection of the creek and the slopes, and that we authorize the payment of a $10,000 retainer for those services to be billed at, with his time, to be billed at the hourly rate set forth in his letter, and that upon spending $5,000, he will so inform us, and then again, upon reaching I guess $7,500, he will also inform us when we get there, with the reservation that we can terminate the services at any time, but have to pay for the services provided up to the time of termination. And that's my motion.
okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
We do, but I have a slight amendment, which is we need BAR Engineering's basic recommendation of what other sections of those need to protect. And I'm looking for them for the engineering and technical knowledge for that.
Mr. President,
Manager Cook,
in light of Manager Pedersen's statement, I was considering a separate motion, but I will amend my motion to cover the issue that Manager Pedersen covered, and that resolve that we authorize staff to engage with BAR Engineering for purposes of recommending those portions of the parcels we discussed that we believe to be appropriate for the protection of the creek and the slopes.
Right.
That cover, Manager
That's
Pedersen?
pretty good. That's pretty good.
so we have a motion and a second, and work for Mr. Sobiak.
President
Is there
Ziegler.
any more comment, Administrator Jeff?
Yeah, I would, I'd just like a little clarification, because slope is a very broad term. Anything that's over 0% grade is a slope. I am working on the assumption we're talking the high risk erosion areas, those areas that are at risk of sloughing, and that manipulation of them or additional flow onto them would result in, or potentially could result
Slope
in,
collapse, right?
So, Mr. President,
Manager Cook,
I will amend my motion to clarify that we're talking about slopes that may be subject to higher erosion or are considered to be steep slopes, I believe under the rules, including DNR rules, and such other slopes as may result in erosion and adverse effects to the Riley Creek.
I'll concur with that as my second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Mr. Sobiek, do you understand what you're going to be asked to do?
I think I do. I'll work with you on it.
He's muted.
President Ziegler, I will work with Administrator Jeffrey to get any clarification that's needed.
Okay. Mr.
Mr.
Jeffrey,
President, can I ask for a bit of a clarification here briefly? I'm not sure, and I'm coming in, like I say, a little cold, so there may be background. I'm not sure about the statement of the scope that was provided to Mr. Pressman, or from Mr. Pressman, I should say. But I'm understanding that the motion is to pay him a $10,000 retainer, but that he's reporting at certain milestones. And clarification is that not a time and expenses not to exceed amount of $10,000? Michael, is that your?
Yes, Mr. President, managers, but that was probably the wrong use of the term retainer by me. My apologies. What I'm suggesting is that time and expenses not to exceed $10,000 with check-ins at the 50 and 75% mark, and Administrator Jeffrey giving me direction as appropriate. But that way we don't have to stop, start every time one piece of the project is complete. But
that's a clearer contract for me to write, so that would be easy.
Thank you, Michael. My apologies for
No worries.
bad language.
Is that consistent with the manager's expectations and interests and the motion makers in particular?
Mr. President,
Manager Cook?
what I can say is that's why I referenced his letter. His letter was on an hourly rate. And that's why I also suggested the ability to terminate it at any time. And I was okay paying $10,000 because we'd have the right to cut it off and we would know how much, where we were at. But to clarify, put a cap of $10,000 unless on the total amount of fees to help Mr. Welch draft his document.
Okay, Mr. Welch, are you happy you have the information you need? You're muted.
I believe so, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
President Ziegler.
Manager Crafton?
Okay, so we've asked Bar to do the assessment of the slope, the vulnerability, I guess. Does that just include what's sitting there and what can erode, or what does it involve the consequences of compaction from up above?
Mr. President,
Manager Cook?
given that I made the motion was to have, Bar Engineering assist Mr. Jeffrey in delineating those areas that might be subject to high risk of erosion and steep slopes. There was no discussion about compaction, etc. But it's probably broad enough that that would be something that could be taken into consideration, given the fact that if the development is going to occur in the manner in which at least it was outlined when was it Pulte made the proposal, I'm sure that would be a factor taken into account in determining what was at risk of erosion or sloughing. So, sorry to give you a little convoluted answer, Manager Crafton, but I think it's not directly compaction, but I think if you're dealing with steep slope erosion, I think that would be a factor taken into account by Bar in making their recommendation as to the area that should be considered for protection.
President Ziegler.
Administrator Jeffrey.
Yeah, to Manager Cook's point, Manager Kraft. Yeah, and I'm speaking entirely for Engineer Skobiak, but yes, we would be looking at rates, volumes, and locations of discharge points, but excuse me, there will be some nebulous nature of it because would be. So we would have to make certain assumptions about where their discharge points should be located.
I just want
Mr.
to make sure we're doing a comprehensive look. That's what we've asked Bar to do. Okay. As part of this motion. I was just trying to make sure I understood it.
Well, Mr. President,
Manager Cook.
I don't think we authorize a comprehensive look. Can't recall my exact words, but the concept was for Bar to make a recommendation as to areas that should be considered for protection because they are either steep slopes or, but I'm sorry, the other term was high risk. Is it high risk slopes or high risk erosive slopes? So it's not quite as maybe comprehensive as you, Manager Crafton, were thinking, because I think, well, I don't know. I think we have to deal with what there is, and I think the Bar will take that into account. But to say the word comprehensive, I don't know if we're going down that path right now.
Okay.
Okay, Administrator Jeffrey, can we have a roll call vote?
We certainly can. The motion is to engage Conservation Solutions at a not to exceed value of $10,000. Be notified at the 50 and 75% mark to identify appraisers, which the district could engage separately for appraisal of the land, some level, and for the staff to work with Bar to identify slopes and high-risk areas to be protected, to provide adequate protection for said slopes and the creek and other resources there. Manager Crafton,
Yes.
Manager Duval,
Yes.
Manager Cook,
Yes.
Manager Pedersen,
Yes.
Manager Ziegler, or President Ziegler, excuse me,
Yes.
5-0.
Mr. President,
Manager Cook.
I would, in light of this, I'd like to move that we authorize our legal advisors, our attorneys to research and come back to us with a summary of, tell us what rights the current developer, whoever they may be, have in light of our rules and what's transpired and in light of the conditionally approved permit application.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
We have a motion and a second. Council Welch, do you understand? It seems like there might be some clarifying language needed just to make sure we know exactly, or you know exactly what we're asking.
Mr. Chair, managers, Lewis, my colleague Lewis, partner, has been looking at the development of a proposed acquisition scenario. So I don't know what he's determined in that regard. We try not to overlap much on these things. It could be a very short report, in as much as it's a collection of what's been approved and what hasn't been approved. So I think we can probably go find you some information and bring it back. And then if you want something more or different, we can further pursue it from there. I will note that by my understanding, the agreement between the developer who holds the current development rights and the landowner is not a public document. It's not subject to a data practices request or other means of our accessing it without them providing it voluntarily. So we may be limited in what we can find out in that regard. However, publicly granted rights that the developer currently holds, we can readily find.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Do we have any further questions or comments? Administrator Jeffrey, can we have a roll call vote, please?
On the motion to have Smith Partners look at existing development rights on that property. Manager Kraft,
Yes,
Manager DeVell,
Yes.
Manager Cook,
Yes,
Manager Patterson,
Yes.
and President Ziegler,
Yes.
5-0. Okay.
Okay, is there anything further that we need to talk about with regard to the information needed for the potential acquisition, or are we done with this item? Okay, I'm going to take that as we're done with this item. The next item on the agenda was the manager reports.
Good to see you, Michael Pressman.
Thank you, Michael.
Nice to meet you.
Pleasure to be with you all. And as a neighbor and former watershed district employee for Minnehaha Creek, I appreciate the seriousness with which you take your responsibilities. And I'm looking forward to working with you.
thanks so
Thank you.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so are there, we're in the discussion items, manager reports, I believe.
Mr. President,
Manager Cook,
I submitted a outline of a manager report to Mr. Jeffrey, but given that this is the third meeting of this for this meeting, I'm going to defer my comments until our next regular meeting. I'm sure nobody will object to me doing that.
okay. So any other managers have something to report?
Oh, Mr. President,
Manager Cook?
there's only two items I want to bring out because I did have a copy with Rebecca, is it Prochaska? I don't know if I pronounced her name correct. So I just had I had a cup of coffee with her. I already reported, she informed me that there was a settlement be happening, with the Friends of the Creek. And then the only other thing I just wanted to bring up is that I had coffee also with Mr. Melby, who brought to my attention, is it Melby? It brought to my attention, and he had provided to Administrator Jeffrey, which I think he circulated, about the Eden Prairie tree plan or tree report that they had several years ago, which I think is something, worth discussing. But I just wanted you to know that I had those meetings, but I don't go any further. We can talk about that next week. Is it?
President Ziegler,
Administrator Jeffrey?
something you just said, Manager Cook. Good, you might be able to clarify it for me, because in the report, it says a lot, we, but I had no idea who the we was. So it was something that was commissioned by the developer for their submittal. Is that your understanding?
Excuse me, Mr. President, if I can respond.
Yes.
It wasn't clear. It was and I haven't read it in great detail, but in talking to Mr. Melby, this was some type of plan or document about trees, et cetera, and their impact on Eden Prairie. I mean, this has been some time ago. And he expressed the concern of, removing too many trees. And I think he was of the opinion that report wasn't being, implemented to save trees. But that's all I know. I haven't read it in great detail, but I think it is something. We talked about rules, and we've been talking about soil health stuff. We talked about trees, and I think it might be a really good thing to, document to consider as we go forward and talking about, soil health and slopes and all this good stuff. So, but to answer your question, Administrator Jeffrey, I'm not sure. I'm not sure what the we actually refer to.
Thank you.
Okay, any other managers have questions or a report? Hearing none, I think this might be the last thing is the administrator report. Oh, wait, not the last thing. Then we go to legal reports. Is there any administrator report?
President Ziegler, managers, I must admit, I'm having a hard time remembering what happened prior to the April 12th meeting and what has happened subsequent to it. So I will wait as well until the regular meeting to update on everything.
Okay, that brings us to the legal report, if there is one.
Mr. Welch shook his head in the negative.
Okay.
No
looked at-
report, managers.
Okay, thank you. The next thing is upcoming board topics.
Half of which have already occurred. And they were good.
Mr. President,
Manager Cook?
I would just like to ask, it was one of the things on my list, and I bring it up now because it's a topic, is I believe that I thought there was floated around a list of topics for not only the board meetings, but also for workshops. And I wonder if we couldn't circulate that with every meeting just to refresh our recollection, and we can decide if maybe things need to be addressed if they've been forgotten. So that's just a request that we each month circulate that list. Not that we're bound to it, just that so maybe we don't forget things we want to address.
President Ziegler, Manager Cook actually brings up something that I did want to address in this administrator's report. Thank you. So thus far, I have heard from Manager Pedersen as far as items that she would like to see included on that. If other managers have them, please get them to me, and then I would bring it back to you either at the next workshop or next meeting, whenever we have time, and you can prioritize, knowing that we have limited number of meetings that we can get them all in. So if you could do that, that would be great.
Good.
Okay. So the upcoming events, as Administrator Jeffrey pointed out, some of those are already not future events. Is there any more discussion, or are we at a point where we could adjourn?
Mr. President,
Manager Cook?
I don't want to cut off Manager Pedersen, but I'm going to move to that we, I guess, terminate this meeting without further continuances.
I was gonna second or put the motion in for the same thing, so.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any last discussion that somebody needs to have, manager or otherwise? Hearing none, we're adjourned. Oh, wait, we didn't vote. Oh, can we have a roll call vote, please, Mr. Jeff?
Yeah. Manager Crafton, and you are muted.
Yes.
All right. Manager DeVell?
Yes.
Manager Cook?
Yes.
Manager Pedersen?
Yes.
President Ziegler?
Yes.
5-0. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, everybody. Good evening.
Good night.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Take
Take care.
care.